The revolution is real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? lit. Real, live, lit. Right? The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akil Al-Jundi, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC. Today's study is themed, The Verdict is In, Reparations Now, Part 2. The book documents the first tribunal on reparations for African people in the U.S., organized by the African People's Socialist Party and held in Brooklyn, New York in 1982. This historic hearing used international law to put the U.S. government on trial for genocide against African people. The panel of judges ruled that the U.S. owed $4.1 trillion in reparations to African people. Chairman Omali Yeshitela served as the people's advocate, presiding over the proceedings. This historic book records his statements and the testimonies of African workers, academics, and experts. Compelling testimonies were given by Professor Leonard Jeffries, Black Panther leader Afeni Shakur, Professor Del Hunter, Attica Prison resistor Akil Al-Jundi, political prisoner Mafundi Lake, and many more. The book is available for purchase at theburningspear.store. This new edition features a new preface, an introduction by Secretary General Louise Kinshasa, and an epilogue by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. For today's study, we're going to be reading the powerful presentations delivered by the People's Advocate. Chairman Omali delivered the tribunal's opening statement, summaries on the indictment of the U.S. for the crime of genocide, and the final verdict. We'll start by reading the indictment of U.S. imperialism, which establishes the legal basis for the tribunal. We'll then turn it over to the People's Advocate to read the opening statement and summation of the tribunal. You can access all of the reading materials in the description of this video. After, we'll do a short break for announcements, then take questions from the audience. And before we start, make sure to like and share this video far and wide. Take a moment right now to like this video, tag your friends, subscribe to our YouTube and Chairman Omali's Twitch channel. Also, throughout the study, we'd like for any donations to go to uhurutours.com/donate. Donating to Uhuru Tours today will help to bring the electrifying presentations of Chairman Omali Yeshitela to the Northeast U.S. this fall. Again, that's uhurutours.com/donate. So let's start the reading. And again, we're going to be starting with the indictment of U.S. imperialism. So I'm going to take us through. We're not going to read that entire chapter, so I'll let you know when we stop. However, we are starting on page 53. If you have access to a physical copy of the book or on the PDF, it will say Indictment of U.S. Imperialism. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, today we are charged with the most serious responsibility of bringing charges against the United States government for crimes it has committed against the oppressed African people in the United States. In the name of the oppressed and domestically colonized African population in the United States, this World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the United States charges the United States government with crimes against our people, which constitute a violation of international law, such law being defined for the purpose of this World Tribunal as 1. General international law. By general international law, we mean that law which is defined in Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice as A. International conventions, whether general or particular, establishing rules expressly recognized by the contesting states. B. International custom, as evidence of a general practice accepted as law. C. The general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. D. Judicial decisions and the teachings of the most highly qualified publicists of the various nations as a subsidiary means for the determination of rules of law. 2. The Charter of the United Nations. The World Tribunal is requested to pay particular attention to the following areas of the Charter of the United Nations. A. The Preamble, which determines that the United Nations is committed to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, of nations large and small, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. B. Article 1, Sections 2, 3, and 4, which explain the purpose and principles of the United Nations as Section 2, to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. Section 3, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, and Section 4, to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends. See Article 6, which states, a member of the United Nations which has persistently violated the principles contained in the present charter may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. D. Articles 55 and 56, respectively, which read as follows. Article 55. With a view to the creation of conditions of stability and well-being which are necessary for peaceful and friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principles of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, the United Nations shall promote A. Higher standards of living, full employment, and conditions of economic and social progress and development. B. Solutions of international, economic, social, health, and related problems, and international cultural and educational cooperation. And C. Universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. Article 56. All members pledge themselves to take joint and separate action in cooperation with the organization for the achievement of the purposes set forth in Article 55. 3. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. This convention reads in part, Article 1. The contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law which they undertake to prevent and to punish. Article 2. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Article 3. The following acts shall be punishable. A. Genocide. B. Conspiracy to commit genocide. C. Direct and public incitement to commit genocide. D. Attempt to commit genocide. E. Complicity in genocide. 4. The International Bill of Human Rights, which is comprised of 4 related documents entitled Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and Optional Protocol. While the entire International Bill of Human Rights represents a milestone in the development of international principles of law and morality, we are asking the World Tribunal to pay particular attention to these specific articles of each specific document comprising the International Bill of Human Rights. A. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 14, 1. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. We'll have some testimony from Africans from Haiti regarding this particular article. Article 15, 1. Everyone has the right to a nationality. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality, nor denied the right to change his nationality. Article 19. Everyone has the right of freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Article 23. 1. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2. Everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Article 25. 1. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. 2. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. Article 26. 1. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be made compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. 2. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. 3. Parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Article 27. 1. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement in its benefits. 2. Everyone has the right to the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production of which he is the author. Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights of freedom set forth in this declaration can be fully realized. B. International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Part 1, Article 1. All peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. 2. All peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. Article 10. The state parties to the present covenant recognize that 1. The widest possible protection and assistance should be accorded to the family, which is the natural and fundamental group unit of society, particularly for its establishment and while it is responsible for the care and education of dependent children. 2. Special protection should be accorded to mothers during a reasonable period before and after childbirth. During such period, working mothers should be accorded paid leave with adequate social security benefits. Article 12. 1. The state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone in the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. 2. The steps to be taken by the state parties to the present covenant to achieve the full realization of this right shall include those necessary for A. The provision for the reduction of the stillbirth rate and of infant mortality and for the healthy development of the child. D. The creation of conditions which would assure to all medical service and medical attention in the event of sickness. C. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Article 1. A state party to the covenant that becomes a party to the present protocol recognizes the competence of the committee to receive and consider communications from individuals subject to its jurisdiction who claim to be victims of a violation by that state party of any of the rights set forth in the covenant. No communication shall be received by the committee if it concerns a state party to the covenant which is not a party to the present protocol. This is exactly why we must, at this World Tribunal, establish the precedence of the ability of a people without possession of state power to bring the international community to those states, those forces, organizations who do possess state power and who are responsible for its oppression. Article 2. Subject to the provisions of Article 1, individuals who claim that any of their rights enumerated in the covenant have been violated and who have exhausted all available domestic remedies may submit a written communication to the committee for consideration. D. International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Article 4. State parties condemn all propaganda in all organizations which are based on ideas or theories of superiority of one race or group of persons of one color or ethnic origin, or which attempt to justify or promote racial hatred and discrimination in any form, and undertake to adopt immediate and positive measures designed to eradicate all incitement to or acts of such discrimination, and to this end, with due regard to the principles embodied in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the rights expressly set forth in Article 5 of the Convention, inter alia A, should declare an offense punishable by law all dissemination of ideas based on racial superiority or hatred, incitement to racial discrimination, as well as all acts of violence or incitement to such acts against any race or group of persons of another color or ethnic origin, and also the provision of any assistance to racial activities, including the financing thereof. B, shall declare illegal and prohibit organizations and also organize in all other propaganda activities which promote and incite racial discrimination, and shall recognize participation in such organizations or activities as an offense punishable by law. C, shall not permit public authorities or public institutions, national or local, to promote or incite racial discrimination. Article 5. In compliance with the fundamental obligations laid down in Article 2 of this convention, state parties undertake to prohibit and to eliminate racial discrimination in all of its forms, and to guarantee the right of everyone, without distinction as to race, color, or national or ethnic origin, to equality before the law, notably in the enjoyment of the following rights. A, the right to equal treatment before the tribunals and all other organs administering justice. B, the right to security of person and protection by the state against violence or bodily harm, whether inflicted by government officials or by any individual group or institution. C, political rights, in particular the right to participate in elections, to vote and to stand for election, on the basis of universal and equal suffrage, to take part in the government as well as in the conduct of public affairs at any level, and to have equal access to public service. D, other civil rights in particular. I, the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of the state. Or 2, the right to leave any country, including one's own, and to return to one's country. 3, the right to nationality. 4, the right to marriage and choice of spouse. 5, the right to own property alone, as well as in association with others. 6, the right to inherit. 7, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. 8, the right to freedom of opinion and expression. 9, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Economic, social, and cultural rights in particular. 1, the rights to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, to protection against unemployment, to equal pay for work, to just and favorable remuneration. 2, the right to form and join trade unions. 3, the right to housing. 4, the right to public health, medical care, social security, and social services. 5, the right to education and training. 6, the right to equal participation and cultural activities. F, the right to access to any place or service intended for use by the general public, such as transport, hotels, restaurants, cafes, theaters, and parks. Article 6. State parties shall assure to everyone within their jurisdiction effective protection and remedies through the competent national tribunals and other state institutions against any acts of racial discrimination which violate his human rights and fundamental freedoms, contrary to this convention, as well as the right to seek from such tribunals just and adequate reparations or satisfaction for any damage suffered as a result of such discrimination. Article 7. States parties undertake to adopt immediate and effective measures particularly in the fields of teaching, education, culture, and information, with a view to combating prejudices which lend to racial discrimination and to promoting understanding, tolerance, and friendship among nations and racial or ethnic groups, as well as to propagating the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and this convention. So, comrades, we're going to stop right there in the middle of page 63. We wanted to read this because this section, which is the indictment of U.S. imperialism, which again lays out the so-called legal basis for this tribunal, the verdict that was concluded at the end of this tribunal, which clearly shows that the U.S. government is guilty for the crime of genocide against African people. And so to hear the opening statement, as well as the summation of the World Tribunal, I invite now, and it is my honor to invite up the people's advocate at the First World Tribunal for Reparations to African People, as well as the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Director Akil. I'd like to express my appreciation to you and to all of the people who are participating in today's study. As usual, I want to send in a special shout out to brothers and sisters who are on the continent of Africa and into other places around the world where African people have been dispersed, who've been used purely to create wealth for this colonial mode of production, within this colonial mode of production, and where various resources, tremendous amounts of resources have been shipped out and sent to Europe, sent to North America, and then even in places like Australia, New Zealand, et cetera. This expropriated value has taken away resources that might go into the development of infrastructure. So while we have a situation where 80% or more of the coltan necessary for computers, things like that, come from Congo. In Congo, there's little access to internet, to computers, and it's certainly not something that's generalized. That is true all over Africa. And so in most instances where people have some access, they have to come together, and many people are participating in this discussion on today as part of a group discussion. So I just want to salute all of you for whom I know it is difficult to participate in these discussions, and which of course is a primary basis for the struggle that we're all involved in, much of which is centered in this discussion we're having today around reparations in terms of the recapture of the resources that's been stolen from us, that's bled from us on a regular basis. So I want to send a shout out to you. I want to send a shout out in Ghana in particular to my sister-in-law, Afua Waller, who is engaged in struggle there. As many other comrades and brothers and sisters, I know that there are group studies happening in places they call South Africa and Sierra Leone and Liberia and various other places. So I just wanted to really express appreciation for your participation and to acknowledge what it is that you have to go through in order to participate in this discussion, which really punctuates what this discussion is all about. When we talk about issues like reparations and we talk about a world tribunal that revolves around the amount of value that has been stolen from Africa and from African people collectively. On August 21st, the Guardian newspaper in England published a really interesting kind of article that spoke of a tremendous amount of wealth that comes from and has come from Africa traditionally. And this is based on a report that came from the from CARICOM, the Caribbean Community Economic Entity. And an overview of this article states that A new report meticulously analyzes the true cost of the transatlantic slave trade, showing how past and present are bound together. Delving into a deeply unsettling chapter of history and seeking to reshape the discourse, a groundbreaking report, Reparations for Transatlantic Chattel Slavery in the Americas and the Caribbean, has calculated that Britain owes a staggering sum of 18.6 trillion pounds. Other nations with a legacy of slaveholding, such as the United States, Portugal, Spain, and France, also stand accused of owing trillions. The total economic toll is thought to be as high as $131 trillion. The revelations lays bare the enduring ramifications of the transatlantic Atlantic slave trade and the struggle for reparative justice on a global scale. It's a 115-page report. This dissects the complex aftermath of slavery, calculating the true cost, not only economically, but also the intangibles, the harrowing loss of liberty and life, the stolen potential of foregone earnings, and the deprivation that reverberates across centuries. Its recognition of intergenerational trauma, loss of heritage, and resulting disparities in life expectancy, employment opportunities, and income is all meticulously analyzed. Particularly incisive is this calculation of cumulative wealth and gross domestic product amassed by nations that exploited African labor. This approach delves into the systemic enrichment of European countries, showing a web of culpability beyond individual actions. Another striking feature is the report's dissection of the enslavement and post-enslavement eras. The figures of 103 million pounds exceeds the 2019 annual collective gross domestic product of the world. Brattle's research, this is the author, highlights the 20 million pounds paid to British enslavers in 1833, an amount that translates to $17 billion today. This is money given to those who enslaved us. This is in 1833. They were paid by the British 20 million pounds. That amounts translates to 17 billion pounds today. This compensation, extracted through a Bank of England loan, continued to be shouldered up to 2015 by British taxpayers, including the Windrush generation. Those are Africans who came to England from various areas of the colonies to rebuild England after the Imperialist War, and other descendants of enslaved people. It is a stark reminder of the unbroken chains that bind the present to a past that must be reconciled. Critics of calls for reparations say responsibility should be confined to those who directly perpetrated the crimes of slavery and colonialism. But the legacy of slavery and colonialism continues to shape our social, economic, and political structures, entrenching inequalities spanning generations. Therefore, far from blaming the individuals today, reparations acknowledge the impact of systemic oppression and strive to rectify collective wrongs perpetrated by systems and institutions. Western societies have inherited benefits from historical exploitation, building generational wealth while dismantling that of the enslaved and consciously engineering inequalities. So I just wanted to put that before us to say this is what we're looking at. We're talking about amount of value that they acknowledge exceeds the total gross domestic product of the entire world. The most extraordinary, the most atrocious offense that's been committed against people in human history is what we are looking at right now. And it's more than just the money that's taken. It's what we characterize as mental illnesses and things like that we see in our community, where African people have been denied the right to even be African, where you can't wear your hair a certain way, where you're terrified of even going to visit people who live in particular communities or who are participating in struggles just to win our freedom. Where you recognize that today we are talking about a world tribunal that happened in 1982, where we calculated just in wealth alone, just an amount of wealth rather stolen from human labor of African people, something like more than 14 trillion, more than $4.1 trillion, and that was in terms of the economy value of 1982, and even that was a profoundly significant understatement of the amount of value. But it's important for us to understand this, that we're looking at a social system that has its origin and it's maintained today through the enslavement of African people. And now we are talking about a tribunal. It's an incredibly significant tribunal. And we want to talk more about that. But I want to say also that today's study is about more than legalisms and reparations. It is about the work of the African People's Socialist Party for more than 50 years to advance the revolution that's necessary to overturn the current relations of power that exists between Africans, the colonized and the colonizers, often spoken of as Black people and white people, etc. But this is what we are talking about. We are talking about a colonialism that empowers the colonizer and disempowers those of us who are colonized. And this imposition of foreign and alien power is what we are talking about over our people. And it represents that foreign and alien power is represented as state power, and that's exercised through hostile governments against us. It wouldn't be called hostile if it were not responsible for maintaining the system of ongoing extraction of value and life from Africa and African people and others of us who are colonized. So it's about more than just calculating some amount of money that they owe us and therefore planning to have your house painted as a consequence of a payoff or something like that. It is about a social system that it came into being and maintains itself through this process of this ongoing process of extracting value. It is about a social system that has created institution that institutionalizes its presence, not only as it relates to Africa and African people, but the whole world. We call this a colonial mode of production that we're talking about. It's reflected in the power of governments over people from whom power has been taken, and who it is reflected in the exercise by these governments of state power. This power that will attack people and Africans and others who are trying to escape the clutches, the bloody clutches of this colonial system. And when we look at and listen to just what I was talking about from the United Kingdom, this Guardian article from the United Kingdom, you see that the entire world economy revolves around what they steal from Africans and other people who colonize around the world. The origin of this social system is the assault on Africa, the assault that also brought into its grasp the people who are now colonized and live in this colonial mode of production around the world. We are talking about a system that has come about and involves the expropriation and redeployment of productive forces, the ability to produce and reproduce life. They took that from us and they redeployed it so that when we produce life and reproduce life, it's not for Africa and African people. This is true of the colonized. We produce and reproduce life for the colonizers, for those who live at our expense, for those who would do anything to protect this social system, protect the poverty of African people, that is to say, to maintain it. This is what it is that we are looking at. When we look at the demand for reparations, as we are discussing now, we are looking at this demand as a function of our struggle for liberation of the productive forces. Colonialism is the capture of the productive forces, the human beings ourselves, our human labor, which is critical for the productive forces, the land of Africa, all over the Caribbean and various places that we located, and in Africa itself right now, various places where we don't control the land, we don't control the resources, we don't control the labor. It is controlled by hostile foreign entities. And so that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about liberating the productive forces. That's what the African People's Socialist Party has been about. And so that contributes to our understanding of the significance of the tribunal, partially because the World Tribunal that we're speaking of today, that Comrade Director Akil has just addressed in terms of the indictment and why we would indict the U.S. government, it is part of the reason for conducting the tribunal. It provides us an opportunity to expose this relationship, to bring people into an understanding, discuss this relationship, to expose the reality that, as opposed to how we've been taught and continuously taught over and over and over and over and over again about the beneficence of a white power, beneficence of colonialism, how it has made tremendous sacrifices to come to Africa, to come to the Americas, to bring civilization and to bring Christianity and things like to us. It's theft. It's an assault on resources, assault on life and stuff, so that the production from us goes to production for our colonizers. So we are also having this discussion on today because it's necessary to say that the International World Tribunal we created was the process of developing institutions of state power, incipient institutions of state power, a court, a tribunal, laws, etc., are expressions of the power of the state power. The state, of course, is that entity that has the ability to coerce, that entity that maintains like through a kind of bureaucracy. And it is the court system, it is the prison system, it is the CIA, the FBI, the police department where you're located, it's the jails and things like that that we live in. This is the state that we are talking about. Now, what has to happen is the negation, the state of the colonizer has to be negated so that the colonized people ourselves can exercise state power over our own lives, because we cannot exercise state power through their apparatus, through the entities that were created for the purpose of creating and maintaining our enslavement. So that's one of the reasons we will have this tribunal that we are talking about today. And I just want to remind everybody again that what we are looking for is the fact that we are having this tribunal, this discussion on the tribunal that happened in 1982 at a time where the United States government is planning to imprison me for at least 15 years. They plan to give me a life sentence if their plans do not exceed that between now and the time that they plan to put me on trial in February. And the reason they're putting me on trial is to be found in this discussion that we're having today. The assumption that we are working with, that the U.S. government would have us working with, the colonial powers would have us working with, is that somehow I've broken a law of the United States government, that somehow I'm supposed to be working for the Russians because I'm talking about reparations, because I'm talking about genocide being committed against African people. Of course, if you look at just this document that we're talking about today, we've been doing this forever. Africans have been doing this forever. The struggle for our people is a legitimate struggle, and that we have agency as people and don't need Russians and don't need white people, don't need Biden, don't need any other force telling us what to do. We have the ability to analyze our reality ourselves and to act upon it. And that's what this tribunal is about. This tribunal did that. This tribunal established itself as a precedent for, and also a precedent even in the law of the colonizer. So what is law? How does law come into existence? Is it sent like the mythological story of Moses coming from the mountain with the 10 commandments written on some kind of stone that he presents to the world? Does it represent actual interests of states, of governments, of classes in the world? And we say law is the opinion of the ruling class. And whatever the ruling class thinks whatever the ruling class and the system needs in order to perpetuate its existence is the law. And anything that challenges the monopoly of power and resources in the hands of the oppressor, in the hands of the capitalists who rest upon this foundation of oppression is illegal. So to have someone who is enslaved talking about freedom breaks the law. Trying to be free breaks the law. And that's been true of colonized people globally. And so I want to go now and move further. I just wanted to say those things. And now what I want to do is go toward the opening statement. And I hope I haven't challenged our time schedule that seriously, but I felt like it was important to bring that into this discussion so that we have, I think, a fuller understanding of what the hell we're talking about and what the hell we're doing and what our expectations are, what it is that we have to do. So what we have to do, of course, is have state power. We talk about that in this document. And you don't, and the oppressor will not give you state power. We have to accomplish that ourselves. And to accomplish that means that we have to create organization that's guided by scientific, advanced revolutionary theory so that we can conquer our power. This tribunal is part of a process that represents a political party moving toward the conquest of power for our people. So here's the opening statement that was made at that tribunal on November 13th, 1982. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, on today we are initiating a 2-day process, which is remarkable and historic in its implications for the use of international law as a means of addressing the crimes against oppressed peoples who do not have the benefit of state power, and the use of national and international courts, which are traditionally only available to those groups who do possess state power. On today, we are initiating a 2-day trial of the United States government for crimes it has committed against the Black or African population of the United States. This 2-day World Tribunal will be conducted in a most serious manner, in the most serious manner possible. Indeed, the seriousness with which we conduct ourselves during these proceedings will be one of the factors which will contribute to our ability to establish the important precedents in international law. These precedents will allow from this day forward other peoples who also do not have state power to bring those who do possess state power and are responsible for oppression and violation of commonly held principles of international law before the world community to be held accountable for their crimes. The seriousness of this World Tribunal ought to therefore be clear to all who are present here today. At this juncture, it seems important to establish the authority of this tribunal to conduct this World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States. We would therefore like to assure this panel of international judges, as well as the official observers and the people attending this World Tribunal, that every effort has been made to ensure that the conduct of this World Tribunal will be fair and that it will meet with the highest standards of justice as understood throughout the world. In those instances where such standards have suffered, it has only been due to the conditions from which we suffer due to the crimes and conditions imposed on us which have made this World Tribunal necessary. For example, we have given serious consideration to the need for representatives of the United States government, past and present, to be here for these proceedings and to give testimony as to their role and responsibility for the charges being brought against the United States government on this day. To this end, serious consideration was given to the idea of subpoenaing former U.S. Presidents Gerald Ford, Richard Milhouse Nixon, and James Earl Carter, as well as the current U.S. President Ronald Wilson Reagan, along with the entire Congress of the United States. However, as the result of much discussion, which included the views of those licensed to practice law by the United States government, it was decided that such a subpoena would more than likely result in the loss of license by any participating attorney at these proceedings who received their authority to practice law within the United States from the United States government. We're therefore confronted with the contradiction of having a hearing as this one, being able to effectively bring to trial those who are charged with breaches of international law when they are in possession of state power and are being charged by those who do not possess state power. Nevertheless, we have made it possible for representatives of the United States government to attend these hearings, should they decide. And we declare today at this public hearing that should there be representatives of the United States government or those who are willing to speak to its defense, this World Tribunal is open to such participation. Moreover, this World Tribunal has been widely publicized throughout the United States through announcement posters, more than 7,000 of which were posted in this city alone, through announcements and articles in Black newspapers, through widely listened to radio talk programs and announcements, through leaflets distributed at mass meetings, and through public community hearings organized by the National Committee which organized this World Tribunal. Therefore, it should be clear that nothing about this World Tribunal has been secretive. There has been no attempt made to exclude the participation of the United States government from these hearings. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, we are confident that we will be quite capable of establishing the rules and principles of international law which give legitimacy to these proceedings. I will deal with these shortly. However, the fundamental legal question we are confronted with regarding the authority of this World Tribunal are tied to the question of state power. We are not aware of a historical precedent where those who do not possess state power have been able to make a legal judgment against oppressors who do hold state power, which has been accepted by the world community. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, never before has the United States of North America been brought before a world court to answer for its crimes against our people. Never before has the United States of North America been brought before a world court to answer for its crimes against our people. On those occasions where it was attempted at the United Nations, we were confronted with the obstacle of these requirements. One, the necessity to possess state power, or two, the agreement of the United States government to allow such charges to be brought against it, or three, the willingness of some other member state of the United Nations to act on our behalf. Being unable to meet any of these procedural requirements, the oppressed African people has been therefore relegated to the authority of the United States government and crimes by it, which have become legendary in notoriety and proportion. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, this matter of state power demands a precedent in international law. We must establish this precedent with these proceedings at this World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States. To do otherwise makes a mockery of international law and its intent. For it may very well be that the crime being protested is the actual denial of self-determination and state power, such as we contend is the case with the oppressed, domestically colonized African population of the United States. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, I would bring your attention to the Charter of the United Nations, which in its preamble declares its purpose to be, among other things, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrows to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Most African people, and perhaps it's true of most people in the United States, do not understand the concept of law beyond what it is that we live with here in the United States or endure here in the United States. One of the things that's important about the tribunal as we initiated it
is to bring attention to Africans and other people who suffer under colonial domination, that there is such a thing that's characterized as international law. This is true, despite the fact that much of what we know as international law was created while most of us lived under colonial domination. In Africa, the indigenous peoples here, and that includes all the indigenous people here and all of what is characterized as the Americas, all of the colonized people. This what we recognize as international law was something that was constructed behind our backs, or on our backs, I should say. But nevertheless, it is something that we are able to use as a template for coming to a better understanding of our conditions, and also even how the ongoing process, whenever necessary, of the colonizer, of those who have power to change the rules, to move the goalposts anytime they want to. They create the law, but we're going to hold them to their own law, and that's what part of this process has been about. That's what the World Tribunal has been about, because we think that there are profound contradictions that exist between what the colonizer says should be the reality and how it is experienced by the colonized, and then and how this is taken on in processes such as the World Tribunal that we're talking about now, raises the contradictions to the surface and makes it impossible for our oppressors to dodge. And this is one of the reasons that the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement came under attack on July 29th, 2022, to stop us from talking about it, to stop us from raising these contradictions to the surface. And the contradiction we are raising is not a contradiction that is between communism and capitalism, or between any other thing, or even between colonialism and anti-colonialism. The contradiction we are raising is the contradiction to be found in the existing social system and their definition of what is just and what is right, etc. And we continue to expose it. And they can't shoot us out of that. They can't crush that. And that's what Garvey did. That's what Malcolm did. That's what King did. You remember, none of them led military forces to assault the Capitol or anything like that. They just told the truth. They just exposed the reality to African people, and they exposed it to the world. And that's something that the oppressor cannot tolerate. So I want to go further. So we should also pay attention to Chapter 1, Article 1 of the Charter of the United Nations, which reads, and I quote, "The purpose of the United Nations are one. The purposes of the United Nations are one, to maintain international peace and security. And to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace, and for the suppression of acts and aggression or other breaches of the peace, and to bring about by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment of or settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to a breach of the peace. Number 2, to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. And 3, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms of all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, and 4, to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends," unquote. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, these excerpts from the United Nations Charter are important in that they reveal the intent of that great body. All members of the United Nations are bound to the principles which are explicit in this intent found in the preamble and the first article of the United Nations. However, after having established the intent of the United Nations, procedures have been introduced in the Charter which contradict the ability of the United Nations to realize the purpose for which it was explicitly established. For the questions of peace and self-determination spoken of in the United Nations Charter, but so much paper which mocks the oppressed peoples of the world, if those who are struggling for self-determination have no recourse except the revolutionary dispossession of the oppressor, as a means of achieving legal status in the eyes of the international community of nations. Finally, as regards this matter of the intent of the United Nations, it is our contention that implicit in its founding and in its preamble are clear indications that the United Nations was founded as part of a means of challenging the ability of those holding state power to make prey of the oppressed and powerless who do not have possession of state power. It should be remembered that the United Nations was founded in June 26, 1945, 2 months prior to the official conclusion of the Second World War and the defeat of Nazism, which saw 6 million Jews brutally murdered by fascists who held state power over the lives of the Jewish people. This fact, along with the preamble to the United Nations Charter, as well as the references made in respect to human rights and freedom for all without regard for race, religion, and language, references made clear the conclusion, made near the conclusion of a war which achieved much of its renown because of the genocide against the Jewish people, must necessarily be considered while addressing the question of the rights and powerless to conduct these proceedings. So this was founded in 1945. Okay, sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, that is to say the United Nations was. The German Nazis were able to murder 6 million Jews who were not in possession of state power. This notwithstanding the fact that the Jewish people made constant pleas to the international community, as have we Africans in the United States and elsewhere. It was only subsequent to the defeat of Germany that the Nuremberg trials were held, which resulted in the trials of some of the Nazi perpetrators of the genocide of the Jewish people. While the Nuremberg trials may have given some satisfaction to the living, there was nothing it could do for the 6 million dead. We should also mention the establishment of the Nuremberg trials after the defeat of Germany to try Nazis for war crimes committed prior to the establishment of the United Nations and the World Court presupposes a belief in the existence of international law which does not receive its legitimacy from official pacts between consenting states. Right? The importance of the question is to be seen today in the peace-shattering dispossession of the Palestinian people and the constant aggression against the Arab peoples in the Middle East by the illegitimate state of Israel, which was established in bloodshed, using as an excuse the inability of international community to address the needs of the Jewish people when they did not possess state power. What about the dispossessed Palestinian people? In the absence of the possession of state power, aren't they compelled to utilize armed struggle to realize their just aims? Is this the world peace spoken of so hopefully in the United Nations Charter? This World Tribunal must give a resounding no to the answer of this last question. The World Tribunal, this World Tribunal, the people present and now international observers must affirm the authority and legality of these proceedings. Otherwise, there will be no peace on the face of the earth, for the oppressed and colonized African people in this country has demonstrated over and over again that we will fight for our freedom. Indeed, U.S. prisons are filled with the sons and daughters of our struggle for freedom. This World Tribunal must affirm the legality of these proceedings in order to validate within the international community those whose love of freedom is so great that they would put their lives and limited liberty on the line in its pursuit and defense. We validate Sundiata and Assata and all these other forces. We have to. To do less than that. We cannot allow them to be characterized as criminals, etc. The crime this tribunal is dealing with is that which has been committed against our people that would make it necessary for people like Assata and Sundiata and others of us to engage in and struggle of the highest level of struggle, including armed struggle. Sisters and brothers and Africans and peoples of the world, to less than this, to do less than this, to withhold the right to justice to the powerless, to those whose greatest victimization has been the forced theft of liberty, of self-determination, of state power, is to give countenance to international piracy and brigandage. To withhold the right to justice and international legality to the powerless, oppressed African people in the United States would be to validate the most cynical concept that might makes right. It would give credence and validity to the awful concept of the right of the powerful to make and enforce international law. Such law as that is no law at all. It is accepted tyranny. Therefore, this World Tribunal must determine whether international morality might prevail in the interest of the powerless. This tribunal will determine whether, even in the absence of state power, the rights of the oppressed will be recognized as rights which may be respected in the form of applied international law, whether they may be respected in the form of an international trial of an oppressor or state power. In order for international law to operate effectively, it must be law which is respected by the international community as a body of jurisprudence. This World Tribunal is well aware that when much of the law that today is respected as international law was recognized, the vast majority of the world's population was under some kind of colonial bondage. Of the more than 150 recognized existing nations today, there were only 55 member nations of the United Nations upon its founding. Some 75% of the other recognized nations existing under a state of colonialism. Let's say that again. Of the more than 150 recognized existing nations today, there were only 55 member nations of the United Nations upon its founding. Some 75% of the recognized nations existing under a state of colonialism. This meant that 75% of the world's population had nothing to say concerning the development of this international law. Clearly, this state of affairs could not promote a respect for international law which was determined and interpreted by those who held state power. The World Tribunal must establish respect for international law. This World Tribunal must establish respect for international law by contributing to its further development. It must do this by establishing the precedent which gives legal sanctions for these proceedings. In the first place, this will be done by the active participation of this international panel, who, with your findings, will validate these proceedings. Secondly, the legality of these proceedings will be established depending upon the seriousness with which we will treat the findings of this World Tribunal subsequent to its completion. This World Tribunal will adhere to general international law in making its determination. We will utilize the definition of international law as that provided for in Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice, which defines international law in the following manner, quote, international conventions, whether general or particular, establishing rules especially recognized by the contesting states. B, international custom as evidence of general practice accepted as law. C, the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. Now that's a tricky concept, civilized nations. I should mention to you that even when the United Nations was talking about self-determination, coming from actually the League of Nations, when they said self-determination, so all peoples, they said this was who have achieved levels of civilization. And it was the oppressor states that determined who was civilized, and who was civilized was most like white people. Most like the British who colonized us, most like the French who colonized us, most like the Portuguese who colonized us. But this is the term that was found here. This is what we mean also in part that we're looking at international law that was created at our expense by those who held us in oppression. D, judicial decisions and the teachings of the most highly qualified publicists of the various nations, subsidiary means for the determination of rules of law, unquote. So we move forward. In addition to this general international law under which this World Tribunal will function, especially paragraph C Article 38. This World Tribunal is being asked to rule on 4 specific documents which have become widely accepted as having the weight of law in the international community. These documents are the United Nations Charter itself, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 9th, 1948. I want to tell you that I'm reading this, something that that was presented to this World Tribunal on November 13th, 1982. It's important to say this because this whole notion that the Russians somehow paid us to talk about genocide is so ridiculous. And this is part of the evidence of what it is that we are talking about. So here are the documents we're asking people to, this panel of jurists to consider. These documents are the United Nations Charter itself, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 9th, 1948, the International Bill of Human Rights, and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Just think if the world actually operated with this law being prevailing, and there was the power to enforce it and make it happen. This panel of international jurists in the World Tribunal of Reparations for Black people in the United States will be asked to indicate yes or no on ballots already in your possession as to whether the United States has violated any of these basic documents on international law, with a majority decision indicating the will of the court. And who in this country, and when I say this country, I mean the United States, have ever heard of an instance where a jury went into a jury room after having heard evidence, etc., and then were given copies of the law to make a judgment by? You damn do that. The judge says this is what the law is, etc. So we have presented with the panel of jurists copies of the law. And it's really important to state this because there's a principle that operates in this country, and that is to say the United States, that something like ignorance of the law is no excuse. You can't use that as the basis for this determining innocence. So here we try to make sure that the jurists and everything are aware of the law. This is what the law is. And you don't get that in a trial in the United States where a jury goes there with the law and said, this is what we're asking you to make a judgment based on. So again, this panel of international jurists of the World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the United States will be asked to indicate yes or no on ballots already in your possession as to whether the United States has violated any of these basic documents on international law, with a majority decision indicating the will of the court. In order to facilitate this procedure, we have distributed copies of these documents to the International Panel of Jurists as to make them available for careful reflection during your deliberations concerning the testimony and evidence to be provided at these proceedings. Having made your rulings on the law, the International Panel of Jurists will then be asked to mark yes or no on a ballot to determine a remedy. This ballot will require a ruling on the following questions. 1, are African people in the U.S. due reparations from the United States government? 2, should imprisoned Black revolutionaries be granted political prisoner or prisoner of war status based on your understanding of international law? 3, does U.S. treatment of Africans in the U.S. represent a serious enough breach of the United Nations Charter to justify eviction of the United States from the United Nations? 4, should there be created an international body to permanently monitor U.S. treatment of African people in the United States? Unquote. So affirmative answer in this area will serve to give international sanction. Affirmative answers in this area will serve to give international sanction to the struggle of Black people to pursue these aims, some of which are embedded in the tradition of our struggle for freedom and self-determination. Finally, I would like to explain my role as people's advocate in these proceedings. In the final analysis, I'm simply a facilitator for this court, acting in the interests of the oppressed, domestically colonized African population. It is my responsibility to present the testimony, the witnesses, and the evidence before this body so as to facilitate the discovery of truth in order that justice may be done. I make no pretense of impartiality, for I am partial. I am partial to truth and justice, as exemplified in the international law which guides these proceedings. Therefore, the fact that I am acting as an advocate of the interests of the oppressed, domestically colonized African population in the U.S. should not be seen as evidence of any predetermination that justice cannot be done. We reject any notion that one nationality cannot do justice by another nationality. We hold true to the notion that international law shall be the property of the people of the world, and that when adhered to in spirit, principle, and fact, shall represent a truth and justice which are inclusive of the interests of all humanity. Having so determined, let us proceed with the hearings at this World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States. Uhuru. So, and we would say further in terms of the summation that was given to this court. I'll read from it, and Comrade Director Akil, I know that you'll provide some leadership in terms of when I've overstepped the time frame that I should be working from. But I just want to read a bit. I want to read from this. This is the summation. All the testimony has been provided, and actually the judges have come to conclusions finding the United States government guilty of that which it was indicted. And this happened again on November 13th, 1982. So here's the summation. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, we've heard the testimony of some of the finest representatives of our people. We've heard testimony which confirms like nothing other than our very existence confirms. Greatness, the greatness of this people who brought civilization to this earth, and who, it is very clear, have the responsibility to bring civilization back to the face of this earth. This is an objective responsibility independent of the will of those of us in this room. We have heard testimony that there has been introduced documentation that shows that it is the oppression of African people here and throughout the world, which is the very foundation, the cornerstone of the existence of this terrible world economic system that causes destruction throughout this earth. Such being the case, it is very clear that if you remove the cornerstone, buildings will come tumbling down. Something like $131 trillion has been calculated by the Caribbean community that we've just quoted from this article that was in August, that was earlier this month, just a few days ago. $131 trillion, that's greater than the total gross domestic product of all the countries on the planet Earth. This is a statement about the foundation of the enslavement, oppression of African people. Somebody who's struggling, try to pay the rent, struggling, try to deal with some slumlord, struggling to try to find food in what is characterized as food deserts within the United States and all over Africa, where we're so rich that Africa no longer has resources, access to our own resources. This is what it is that we're looking at. This is the basis of that, is this social system that sucks the blood. And the people who are struggling to try to get infrastructure to move food from the countryside to the cities or to the market in some place in Africa, or people who again struggling with forces who can open up shops in our communities where we are denied the ability ourselves to have anything like economic freedom. They're not thinking about $131 trillion or more, which is more. I mean, we're talking about that store where that they claim Mike Brown stole some cigars from in 2014. That store is an institution that's part of a process of stealing $131 trillion from Black people. He was just getting some cigars according to their claim. And how many other instances are Africans located someplace just trying to survive? $131 trillion being sucked from that comrade, that brother, that sister, that person who's been chased across the deserts, across the Sahel to try to get to Europe, where our resources have been relocated. You know, that person is not thinking about and even necessarily aware that $131 trillion that you're chasing, part of $131 trillion that's been sucked from that community, from that township, etc. That's what we are talking about, and that's why the United States government would attack us and keep us from being able to take this truth. I want to say we're talking about something that was written in August. CARICOM did this. But on November 13th, 1982, we said it. The first time in history, we provided for the first time in history an actual quantification of the amount of value being stolen from Black people, from that person who's in that community trying to survive, from that person who goes into shops in the communities in the United States. And I've seen it in London, where people operate behind plastic and sometimes bulletproof glasses and what have you in our own communities, et cetera, to protect the stolen resources from those from whom they were stolen. But anyway, so we've heard testimony, and there has been introduced documentation that shows that is the oppression of African people here and throughout the world, which is the very foundation, the cornerstone of the existence of this terrible world economic system that causes destruction throughout the earth. Such being the case, it is very clear that if you remove the cornerstone, buildings will come tumbling down. Yesterday, there was a thing that happened that represented anniversary. What was it, the 40th anniversary? Was it in Washington, D.C.? The anniversary of the March on Washington. It was more than 40 years, 60th year. And it was really interesting because this was something that was being done by Al Sharpton. And he was the one who was the primary organizer. And then they had children of King and other people who marched there. And of course, I said it was done by Charlotte. It was the Democratic Party. And it was a mobilization by the Democratic Party. It was a mobilization by fronts of the Democratic Party. And it has many different fronts. Many so-called civil rights organizations are nothing but representatives of the Democratic Party. And this was part of the project of the 2024 election to keep Joe Biden in power. And you see when I say Joe Biden, he's the primary person now, but there's another Joe Biden in the aisles. This Joe might be Kamala. They're scared to death that it might be Kamala. Some of them. So this is what that whole thing was about. And the objective there was not to get $131 trillion back to Black people or power over our own lives, etc. It was to get people to register. There was no to what end associated with it except making sure that you register, vote, and there's something that you can get some power just by doing that. You don't get power by doing that. They get power by doing that. They keep power by your doing that. Of course, we had to be there. We had to say this to the people who came there because Zuckerberg won't give us direct access to the people, won't allow us to. I say Zuckerberg, I'm talking about Facebook or whatever it's called now. I think it's become so they've had to change the brand now because it's so tainted. People recognize what it does. They call it something else now, I think. Meta. Yeah. And many of them having to change the brand because they've been exposed so much to the people that they have to call themselves something else. What do you call it, an alias? So anyway, so we say that this is the cornerstone, the oppression and exploitation of African people, is the cornerstone of the system. So it says that this is no way to attempt to refute the struggles of the various peoples around the world and the need to be in solidarity with them. It's just like any structure and building. If you want to take it down, there are several routes. You can take it down brick by brick, or you can target the cornerstone and snatch it out, and the entire building comes down. African people, the oppression of African people, the continuing oppression of African people, which every reactionary oppressive force on the face of the earth is in unity to maintain African people, our oppression, which has never ended, which has been continuous, and which has operated on various fronts at the same time, represents the cornerstone and at the same time the weakest link in this imperialist country, this imperialist world. Therefore, the judgment which comes from a tribunal such as this is very, very important. Someone may think that to be able to make such a statement as that statement, to be able to make a statement as those statements made by these jurors represent partiality or biasness, such a person thinking such a thing would be absolutely correct. But to say it represents biasness is not to say that it represents injustice or injustice. It is recognized that all institutions are given birth by the societies from which they are developing. If you live in a situation in any country where there is a court, a police force, an army, a bank, or what have you, that exists in that situation, it will have the nature of the society that it comes from. If you live in a country or world that's built on slavery, barbarity, thievery, genocide, the institutions in that society and any place in the world will be there for the purpose of sustaining the enslavement and the genocide. There is the bourgeois court in this society. That is the court of the slave master, of the ruling class. There have been continuous attempts to prove objectivity when they take us there before lynching us legally. If they don't lynch us on the streets, like so many people testified about in the last 2 days, but what they do when they talk about objectivity is attempt to obscure the nature of the institutions themselves, and the fact that these institutions cannot but be about maintaining that which gave it birth and which enriches it, that which keeps the powerful powerful and the powerless powerless. For today, in the last 2 days, we have set about creating another institution, and this institution, at this juncture in history, does not have a permanent place to rest except in us. And this institution is the World Tribunal, which brought the United States government for the first time in its history to trial for the crimes it has committed against Black people in this country. And this tribunal is biased tribunal. It is a tribunal that moves on the assumption that Black people must be free and that anything that stands in the way of that liberation must be removed. We are biased. I want to say when this might not be an absolute accurate statement when we say it's the first time in history has ever happened, the United States has been put on trial. The first time in history that African people ourselves have put the United States on trial for what it has done to us. It's the first time we have ever done that as a people. 1982, November 13, Brooklyn, New York. This World Tribunal stands in opposition to virtually every court that exists in this country. They are opposing and contending forces. This World Tribunal stands in opposition to the United States Supreme Court. They are opposing and contending forces. One represents the powerful and the oppressive. The other represents the oppressed and those who are determined to be free. It is a biased tribunal. It does not attempt to represent the interests of those who are oppressors. There is no such objectivity on the face of the earth. Some pretend that there is such objectivity. We do not pretend. And if only for that reason, with all of its biasness, this court is much more just court, a much more just court than those courts which exist in this country. I must say that one very difference we are confronted with here is that we do not take the holding of state power lightly. It is the possession of state power by our oppressors that makes them able to carry out their oppressive will. When we talk about state power, we talk about control of the courts, the police, the army, the navy. We're talking about the apparatus that has the ability to coerce, to force people to do what they want done. We do not take lightly the notion of state power. Listen, this question of state power is something that is operative all the time. Even if you don't see physically the police there, etc., people don't go to meetings because they know if the boss know they go to that meeting, they can lose their jobs. They don't go to meetings because they know the police might attack that meeting. They've seen it. They've heard about it. They've read about it. They're frightened all the time. We live in a constant state of fear. And not just some notoriously ridiculous argument that some letter written by some white man some years ago in the Caribbean told you how to control black people by treating the light skin this way and the darks. No, it is state power. It is the gun. It is the lynchers, whether they were lynching legally as defined by the law, or whether it was state power exercised by individual white people, mobs of white people carrying out the will of colonialism by killing us, for saying stuff we shouldn't say, for bombing our churches because they didn't like what we were going to do in terms of voting and things like that. That's what we are looking at. So it's not just that the police are there on every corner, though that helps. It is also because people know that the police can be there. It is also because the people know that the police listen to what you say on the phone. They know what you're doing on social media, all these things. This is exercise of state power and the looming threat of the most vicious kind of violence, which might mean that your 16-year-old son will be in prison for the rest of his life. Oh, maybe not the whole life, maybe just 50 years. This is the kind of thing that we live with on a regular basis. This is state power. And it is prevalent. It is there in our community in ways that it does not. It's there with the native people. It's there with the other indigenous people called Mexicans and so they put children in cages in the border. That's what we are talking about, that we have to live with all the time. So, Mexican family in San Diego go to work or the children go to school and they come back from home and their parents might not be there because they've been kidnapped and deported, forcibly taken out of that particular territory and then shipped across a border that they created for the purpose of being able to separate the Mexican people from their own land, their own resources, etc. That's the state. It's a very insidious thing. You can't just think about it in terms of the police that will put a knot upside your head or that will put a knee in your neck. It's there, the threat of the knee in your neck is something that prevails. It's there all the time. They put a knee in your neck and then the whole world sees it and you see it and your children see it, etc. And then after the initial rage and stuff like that, we got groups of people who will come strike out, etc. But that memory is still there. And so people are too often afraid to do anything about it. There are a lot of political prisoners. You see, we were talking about political prisoners in this document, 1982, but we've been talking about since the founding of the African People's Socialist Party. The political prisoner question is not a new question. The question of those forces who are prisoners of war, it's not a new question. We've been dealing with this question forever, but what they've done is that when they attacked the African Revolution, it's not like attacking a factory. Some workers might be located in the white left or something like that, and you can shut it down like that. They had to attack the whole people. So they attacked the African Revolution. They put the revolution in prison. They put those who they didn't kill, they put in prison. They left only a handful of us there. They had the most insidious assault on basic things that were characterized as democratic rights and were always under assault. They created conditions under which the Africans felt we were forced to abandon the democratic space that we had fought and won. People, they talk about African people. We ran somebody for election in 2017, 2019 on a campaign for reparations, and Russians paid us to do this. Nobody in this country, the United States, has paid the price to vote that's greater than black people. We didn't need any Russians to tell us to vote. We had Americans telling us not to vote. We had the Americans who were bombing our churches. We had the FBI and all these other agencies who were working against that. And this is just a falsification of history that we are talking about. So this is this book by itself is something that I think functions as a part of the evidence when we go into trial in February that we can present to the world. We're presenting to you now so you can present it to the world. You ought to buy this book and you ought to make sure that everybody can see what it is that we've talked about and share what's been discussed on today. So anyway, we must not take lightly the notion of state power. We don't have state power at this time, but we have the capacity for revolutionary people's power. And the question that is before us today, the question that is more important or that will give significance to anything that any witness stated here, more significance than any solidarity shown and that not shown by those who did not have the courage to come and act as judges. The most significant thing that is going to give meaning to any of this, to the risk of life and liberty of those international jurors who sit here because they face tyrants where they come from, tyrants who are upheld by this government, meaning the United States government. The thing that would give meaning is what we do upon leaving this building. If this court and this verdict is going to be recognized as having meaning in the world, it would be because of those of us who are in here. Take it out to the world, understanding its meaning and understanding its legality and forcing everybody else to recognize that legality. I said I had 15 minutes. How do I have now?
I would ask Director.
Okay. Let me tell you something. You know, I was in Ireland. As soon as this tribunal was over, I started traveling the world and to take the reparations demand out before the world. One of the reasons you see it in the world, I traveled from this tribunal. This tribunal made it happen. And then and one of the places I went to was in Ireland. And I'm in Ireland, I met with the Irish Republican Socialist Party, which was a revolutionary organization during the time of the so-called Troubles, when England clearly dominated Ireland, has for 800 years or so. And this was an organization that was fighting to end that. I went to Ireland, where you saw evidence of the same kind of colonial situation. I had never seen white people who live in the circumstance that Africans live till I got to Northern Ireland when I was in Belfast. And I saw Irish people who were living in housing projects with sewage coming up in the yards and stuff like that. And I saw the people who picked me up at the airport when I got there. One was an Irish man who had a deep and profound limp because he had been wounded by British. Another was a woman whose husband had been killed in the bed as they lay there together, and she had been shot and wounded with scars on her neck. And I saw British soldiers functioning just like the police function in our community. They had little forts set up throughout the communities in Belfast, and they ran everywhere they went. They wanted to be a menacing presence there, and they were a menacing presence. But these were people who lived under colonial domination, and I went there. And one of the reasons I went there was to get unity with the demand for reparations that we were raising, and to get unity with the need that we had, because the United States government had never united with the what do you call it, when the government has to take this convention like the Genocide Convention. It was 40 years before this was ratified by the United States government, and then even then it was ratified on the condition that the United States government would not be it wouldn't be applicable to the United States government unless the United States government wanted it to be. And this was the case precisely because the United States was concerned that the indigenous people or African people would take them before the world court and charge them with genocide. And the reason this was important at the time is not because we had an army, a police department that can go and say and make them pay up, but because they were involved in struggle with China and Russia at the time for which had the best systems in the world. And the condition of African people and the condition of the Mexican people and the condition of the indigenous people was a clear example to the people of the world of the oppression that existed inside America. And they didn't want that to be discussed in world courts because the resources of the world was what the contest was all about and who was going to get them. And America wanted to could keep them and prevent Russia and China from participating and helping to elevate the struggles of Africans and other people in a place they want to be free from that system. So I'm there and I'm winning whom can be won to unite with us to around this question of reparations so that America would have to face the world and could not be doing at 5 o'clock in the morning like they did to us at 4 o'clock in the morning, like they murdered Fred Hampton and what have you. They would not be able to do this in the dark anymore. And that they would have to contend not just with us, but the opinion of the peoples around the world and those forces with power. This is where this whole question of unipolarity, multipolarity, all this stuff, that's where it comes from. That's why it has become significant. Because there are other forces out there in the world and people seem to be having choices of how they can line up. That's what the significance of this Ukrainian war, who takes what kind of position. And now they're crying because Africa will not join with them in terms of, and these are even neo-colonial countries that won't join with them in terms of condemnation of Russia and things like that. It is because they need to have a certain, that's why France being kicked out of Niger and other places on the continent of Africa is such an important question. It's resources. How many $1 trillion did we say? 300? Did we say 321 trillion dollars at least that they're looking at, that they're controlling and sucking that blood, sucking those resources from the colonizing from Africa. That's what we're looking at right now. That's the responsibility. I talked to Comrade Nellie Bailey and Betty Davis, who are always concerned that they're looking at this gentrification. I talk to Africans right here in North St. Louis where I'm looking at gentrification. It's 100, it's how many trillion did I say? Let's say 300, 131 trillion, minimum of $131 trillion. That's when I'm out here, when we out here struggling on the streets in West Florissant, and who's going to be able to live here or not. It's $131 trillion at stake that they are defending. That local cop in this community is defending $131 trillion. That local person who is on your city council your board of all the persons, who is your mayor, your governor, they are defending $131 trillion being sucked out of your communities everywhere. That's what we're up against. And all this flowery talk, like they are talking about in Washington, D.C. yesterday. They're going to complete the dream. You know, somebody better wake them up. That's what they're afraid of, that we'll wake them up and let people know what the struggle is all about. It's not to find a better place on the plantation. It's not to find a better job or as a slave. I'm not going to get out of the field now. I can work in the house. No, the thing is that we want to end this oppression and exploitation of our people, and that's why we're under attack. So anyway, let me see if I can get through something quickly. So let me tell you something. We started this tribunal giving a history of the solidarity that African people have given to every revolutionary force in the world. We started off building for this tribunal with promises of solidarity from virtually every revolutionary force in this world. Look at what is here with us in terms of the judges and the world observers. They know the power of US imperialism. We must teach them the power of international solidarity. We shall teach them the power of international solidarity by the forcefulness of the focus that our revolutionary movement in this country finally has. Reparations is a demand whose time has come. Therefore, we can sum it up very easily for anybody, whatever nationality, anybody who presupposes that they are friends of Black people in this country. Do you support the judgment which came from this World Tribunal on reparations for Black people? One, and what is your position on the demand by 40 million Africans in the US for reparations now? The thing that will give meaning to everything that has happened in this room for the last 2 days is our willingness and our capacity to make everybody have to answer that question, everybody. I can't talk about the importance of this too much for too long. Our international allies have accepted the definition of the white ruling class of the world for who we are and our significance all over the world. I'm telling you what I know. I can tell you revolutionary countries where I visited. I've watched Tarzan on television. So now we tell the world, our allies, objectively speaking, our objective allies. Some people are our allies objectively and are just too dumb to know it subjectively. What we have to do is educate them. We call it positive criticism. What's your stand on reparations for Black people? We say the movement has a focus. We don't ask you your position on housing. We don't ask you your position on busing. Frankly, we don't give a damn. What's your position on reparations? What's your position on the $4.1 trillion? That's just in wages. We'll get to the damages later. What's your position, senora, compañero? However you say it, that's the question that has to be answered. On tomorrow, the 15th and 16th, we will be pulling together the beginning of the African National Reparations Organization. That's going to be a part of taking this demand out into the world. We have a process to be involved in terms of bringing all of this testimony and organizing it and putting it out in the world. I'm not exactly sure what methods are going to be used yet. Our party has a minor capacity of publishing. I'm not quite sure what it means in terms of how we do it. I'm hoping that this reparations organization that we create will have the ability to take on that task. There's a publishing company in England which had written when they knew that this tribunal was going to happen. It was called Zed, by the way, suggesting that it would be willing to publish these proceedings. Then the reparations organization must be created to take it out in the world. Then these international sisters and brothers from various places where African people have been dispersed have to take it back and unite our brothers and sisters around the world with this demand, because as quietly as it's kept, for legal purposes, we are targeting the US right now, but the US government and all of Europe understand the implications of a single nigger anywhere on the face of the earth demanding reparations. James Brown made a song about it called The Big Payback. United Nations, the brother said a little about its structure and its inherent injustice. It is an unjust, undemocratic organization, and the U.S. has proved itself to be the most undemocratic of them all. Here's a country preaching democracy all over the world. And you hear this ugly human being, Kirkpatrick is her name. You see this nauseating criminal face a false species of a human being, acting like a fool, talking about because people voted against the U.S., voted against Israel, quote, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take all the cash from the important programs and then take medical aid to peoples around the world. This is the threat, United States government. Then take, in theory, food growing techniques to people around the world. If you vote against us, this bastion of democracy says we'll take the money we'll starve you to death. We'll make this organization collapse. So we'll start a rear guard area action with all the oppressed peoples around the world who don't have possession of state power. If you're as eager to leave as you say you are, then we'll demand that you go because of the treatment of Black people in the United States. And we'll demand of our allies and people who say they support our struggle that they demand that the U.S. go. There was a great man once whose name was Chairman Mao's. He said, U.S. imperialism ain't nothing but a paper tiger. And here we have the peoples of the world quivering because a punk organization like the U.S. saying we'll pull out. And then you know it's a punk organization because every time we fight back against it, we won. Only time we lose is when we don't fight. Right. So the question, every question that's around Black political prisoners and prisoners of war would be recognized as a just and righteous demand by the United Nations, the World Court, any court, depending on what we do. Afeni Shakur is welcome here, depending on what we do. There should be no place and no Black community anywhere in this country that a Sundiata Okoli can't come. And there should be no one that is not willing to do the kind of work that makes it possible for Sundiata Okoli to come there. What we do, we should never allow anybody else to take from us, those revolutionary men and women whose difference from us is that they dared at the critical junctures of history to put their bodies on the line in the struggle for freedom and justice for Black people. So anyway, this goes further and suggests the kinds of things that we have to do to validate this World Tribunal and also to impact on what is considered international law today. Right now, it is law that's in the possession of the colonized, the colonizers. But that is something even on a shaky foundation. And part of what we do and what this tribunal was about and what we do moving forward is negate the influence and the authority
of illegitimate colonial power over the lives of African and other oppressed peoples around the world. Uhuru, comrades.
Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that was also the people's advocate at the First World Tribunal on Reparations to African People in the U.S., as Chairman stated, held in Brooklyn, New York in November of 1982. I really want to salute your leadership, Chairman, the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party around the question of reparations and turning the demand for reparations into a revolutionary demand, a function of the African Revolution. And I just want to read this quote from Comrade Syrup C, who's based in Britain, who says, reparations must always mean Uhuru. We cannot allow the colonizer to co-opt the call for reparations. Reparations without Uhuru is not reparations, and certainly is not Uhuru. So Uhuru, Comrade Syrup C, thank you so much for participating, tuning in. And want to take this time now. We have a limited amount of time for a discussion, but I definitely want to go into announcements to let people know how they can be involved, connect, and come to the latest events that the Uhuru movement is organizing in your city, in your town. And so we can take a look at those announcements. And first, I want to welcome up Comrade Ikinge Mayele, who is the Chief of Staff for the Office of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who will guide us through the call for, we have a goal of $200 to raise towards the U.S. Northeast Tour that will feature Chairman Omali Yeshitela, where we are bringing this book, The Verdict is in, Reparations Now. And if you do not have your copy, please go to the burningspear.store to purchase your copy. And the excerpts that we've read today are available in the description of the video, wherever it is that you're watching from. So you're able to take a sneak peek at those excerpts and order the full book at the burningspear.store. So I see Comrade Ikinge is on with us now. Comrade Ikinge, I'll turn it over to you.
Uhuru, just want to salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. It's been an excellent study today. I want to again encourage everyone, if you haven't gotten your copy, get your copy now. Director Akil already let you know how you can get it. And I just want to thank everyone that has donated to Uhuru Tours today, which is Mattoon, King, Robert, Lisa, and Sarah. We have $125 more that we need to raise today. Again, the tour begins in about 3 weeks, going to Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York. So this is going to be a really powerful and exciting tour. So I'm asking everyone to give. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to encourage everyone to go to uhurutours.com/donate. And let's take this tour beyond what our expectations were. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Ayoka says, I just got my copy yesterday. Can't wait to read it. Uhuru, Comrade. And again, this is just a reminder where you can get this book from, the burningspear.store. So purchase your copy at the burningspear.store. That's The Verdict is in, Reparations Now, the 40th anniversary edition of the report for the 1982 World Tribunal on Reparations to African People. Join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. Drop the charges against the Uhuru 3. Donate or volunteer to the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign today, and learn more information about the counteroffensive at handsoffuhuru.org. And continuing on with the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign on Monday, tomorrow, August 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific time, the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa counteroffensive hosts a mass meeting titled Build the Anti-Colonial Free Speech Sanctuary Movement. Stop police FBI collusion that attacks the people, with presentations from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, members of the Leonard Peltier Ad Hoc Committee, and the People's Alderman Jesse Todd. Register for this mass meeting at tinyurl.com/handsoffmeeting or go to handsoffuhuru.org/events. On Wednesday, August 30th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Central, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, don't miss America's Forever War, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee. This web event will expose the FBI's history and current practice of attacking the freedom struggles of African and Indigenous people, and it will also address how white people can take a stand against FBI attacks and be part of building white solidarity with Black power under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Register at tinyurl.com/FBI war. Every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Africa time, tune in live for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, Africa Region broadcast. The Africa Region of the African People's Socialist Party responds to the attack with a series of programs under the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. Join Uhuru movement leaders Tafari Mugeri, Morlai Conte, and Visto Sabisa, who are making the demand for the FBI and U.S. government to back off and allow the African People's Socialist Party to advance the course of African people for self-determination. Watch and follow on Facebook at facebook.com/APSP Africa Region. To the Midwest region, come to the St. Louis One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market, a program of the Black Power Blueprint to end food apartheid and build economic development in North St. Louis. The market runs 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the new, beautiful location, the historic O'Fallon Park, on the first Saturday of every month. The remaining market dates are September 2nd, and then a special Halloween festival on October 28th. For more information, visit oneafricamarket.com. The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement will be holding its 31st annual convention from September 8th through September 10th, 2023 in St. Louis, Missouri. Africans from around the world will convene at Aquaba Hall in North St. Louis under this year's theme, Deepening the Counteroffensive, Completing the Black Power Movement. This time, we will win. Registration is $25 for the entire weekend, and you can register at NPDUM, that's INPDUM 2023.eventbrite.com. It's Black August, a month recognized for his heroic African resistance from within prison walls. The Burning Spear newspaper sends its monthly issue to over 800 prisoners in the U.S. every month through the Mafundi Lake Prisoner Subscription Program. The Burning Spear newspaper calls on everyone who is able to sponsor a prisoner subscription by donating $25. Sponsor 1, 2, or more subscriptions today by going to theburningspear.com/donate. All out to Washington, D.C. on November 4th for the 15th annual Black People's March on the White House, sponsored by the Black is Back Coalition of Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, as well as the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition. The theme of this year's mobilization is not one step backwards, drop the charges against the Uhuru 3. There will be a pre-rally on Friday, November 3rd, the day before the march, and there will be a conference on Sunday, November 5th, the day after. Register now at tinyurl.com/Uhuru3 and follow blackisbackcoalition.org and handsoffuhuru.org for more information. And if you are in the UK and can't make it to DC, come to the Black People's Rally at the US Embassy in London, organized by Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa London Organizing Committee. Contact 07723 067 486 and stay tuned to the listing on theburningspear.com/events for more information coming soon. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. And Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru movement speakers for your campus or organization now by emailing info@uhurutours.com or calling 727-914-3621. And for more events not listed here, please go to theburningspear.com/events to learn everything we are doing inside the Uhuru movement, what you can participate, be a part of, and build in your area. So that concludes our announcements. And comrades, we are just 5 minutes before we wrap up today's study, but I just wanted to acknowledge where people are watching from: Oakland, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, Flossmoor, Illinois, Fort Myers, Florida, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Britain, St. Louis, Missouri, San Diego, California, Portland, Oregon, Gainesville, Florida, Lexington, Kentucky, Battle Creek, Michigan, Bermuda, Marion County, Georgia, Haiti, Lakeland, Florida, Largo, Florida, and Zambia. Thank you, comrades, for tuning in with us today. And I'm just wanting to now turn it back over to St. Louis to our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, for final remarks as we move to conclude this study. And Uhuru, chairman. Oh, let me see. There you go. All right, you're good, chairman.
Uhuru. Thank you, Comrade Director Akil, and I want to again express appreciation to all of you who participated in this study and who did participate in this study on today. I also just want to say that it's important to recognize that one of the things that distinguishes the African People's Socialist Party is the fact that reparations is not just a thing that we thought of and not just a thing that we see as a means to get some resources, or even something that will help us to build better houses in the communities we live in. We collect reparations in the African People's Socialist Party. I was at a meeting on just yesterday that had been organized by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And in this meeting, there were more than, I don't know how many white people. It was mostly people from the colonizer communities. And we've opened the door to allow ordinary white people to participate in making reparations, to give to the economic development projects and programs that we have created in the African, within the overall movement. And people have done that. And a lot of these were old people, white people, and who made comments like how much they appreciated being able to support self-determination for African people. This is actual statements that were being made, and we've been doing this for a long time now. We've got institutions that have been bringing all of these people into the reparations issue, the struggle for self-determination for African people for a very, very long time. The reparations issue is really important, but for us, it is a part of the struggle for our freedom. We're not trying to become healthier or better off slaves. The objective is to take this power. I'm wearing a button here with something we produced last year, 50 years of relentless struggle for African redemption. And that talks about how long, that was last year, 50 years. We are talking about having been waging this struggle. It's been one continuum. And the reparations issue was a fundamental component of that. It helped to address the fact that all these resources are stolen from Africa. That's the basis of our poverty. That's the basis of also of the ability of a foreign hostile state entity to impose its will on us. And so we say reparations now. I'm asking you to go ahead and get the book. I think it's extremely important because it gives you more information in terms of just the history of our resistance, the history of our struggle, the justification for reparations beyond, again, just trying to get a better welfare check or something like that. We want total freedom. And that's what has to be won. That's the basis of the struggle that we've initiated in the African People's Socialist Party. I want to really express my appreciation to you, express appreciation to the solidarity movement that the African People's Socialist Party has built. That's responsible for so much that has occurred in the whole white world, the colonizer world, for the acceptance of reparations. This is something that sectors of our movement have not been aware of. That we've been getting at the underbelly of the system for a long time. And again, there are scores and thousands of white people who are able to unite with the reparations demand because of this kind of work that we've done. I want to express appreciation to Comrade Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela, who has presided over the last 10 years, for the last 10 years over the economic development projects and work that we've done. That's been designed to negate the power, economic power and influence of the colonizer in our communities. This has been really important kind of work. And I want to thank all of you who are out there, especially you courageous members of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, and all of you who've got enough, who've seen enough to know that you should be a part of this movement and you should be supporting it if you're not a part of this movement, and you should be supporting it secretly if you can't support it publicly. But whatever, you need to be a part of this. This is your revolutionary project. We are the People's Party, the African People's Socialist Party,
And we've developing relations and continue to develop these relationships with oppressed peoples around the world. One expression of that's going to be seen on November 4th, where we have really contributed to the emergence of a powerful anti-colonial coalition that crosses all the political and ideological spectrums and nationalities and things like that throughout the United States and various other places around the world. We're coming together November 4th. Everybody should be there for the 14th annual Black People's March on the White House. This is going to be one that's supported with solidarity from all kinds of peoples who recognize the significance of the question of colonialism and the colonial mode of production. We shall win. We are winning. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, Uhuru, comrades, and I want to join with the chairman in appreciating everybody who participated in this study as a part of the audience, as a part of the team that puts these studies together. And also, of course, want to salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for this profound study and this incredible history and struggle that we are engaged in. And this is just, as you've mentioned, important evidence as we put the state on trial, even in upcoming February. What they've done is allowed us to unleash all of this information, all of this evidence that has been acquired through the history of the work and leadership provided by the African People's Socialist Party. Also want to remind people to subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and to follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. And go to blackisbackcoalition.org or handsoffuhuru.org for information around the November 4th mobilization. Again, get your copy of this book at theburningspear.store. And want to say, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, drop the charges against the Uhuru 3, and reparations now. Uhuru, come.